All right, guys. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Results Loading Podcast hosted by Prosperous AI. I'm your host, Michael Atkin, and today we have the pleasure of speaking with someone who has extensive experience in the construction and HVAC industry. Our guest is Josh Wylie, president of Villara Building Systems. Josh has been with Villara for over 7 years, working his way up from HVAC construction defect expert to his current role as president. Today, we'll explore his career journey, the lessons he's learned along the way, and the strategies he's employed to drive success in the construction and building systems industry. I'll let him tell you more about it himself. But with all that being said, Josh, welcome. Thanks so much for agreeing to join us today.
No, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So like I said, I want to dive right into it here. Can you share the story of how you first got started in the construction HVAC industry, obviously now leading a company? Can you really walk us through where you started, what you're doing now, and in the journey that kind of took place in order to get here, what attracted you to the field? Set the baseline for us, Josh.
Sure, sounds good. So I actually started working at the company when I was 13. And I started there because at the time, my parents said, hey, you can either go do summer school because you're too old to be at camp and we're not going to let you just run around and get in trouble, or you can go to work. And I said, I don't really want more school. Work sounds good. I'd like to save up for a car. And I said, how am I going to get a job? He said, your dad will take care of that. We'll have you come into work with him. So I started early on, had to get into work at 5:30 in the morning. And so started early days working 40 hours a week. And I got started in the estimation department at that time. And it was before companies were using things like AutoCAD. And so I was using vellum paper to trace the outline of the house and giving that to the estimators. And then they were drawing the layouts for the HVAC systems. And so I worked basically every summer and Christmas break all the way through high school. In fact, my senior year, I was working in the estimation department as kind of like your sixth period, your last period of the day, being able to go to work and work. I think a loss at 3 hours a day I could work while being a minor. And so I did that all the way through high school, and chose to go the junior college route and then went to Cal Poly. And when I graduated from Cal Poly, right around the time WorldCom, Enron were going on, and you're just like, man, there's a lot of just not good big corporations out there. I could have gotten a job at a lot of different companies, but I already knew construction and I already had experience in there. And so I said, let me go to work for it. At the time, the company's name was Butler, before we became Villara, and decided, I'm going to work there because it's maybe not the highest paying job that I can get coming out of college, but I know that they won't ask me to do the wrong thing. They are not trying to cheat people. They're not trying to be unethical. And that was important to me. And so from there, I actually started in the warehouse, and they said, we've got a lot of challenges. We're sending out about 100 to 125 orders or shipments to different houses for material a day. And we've got at the time about $16 million worth of inventory that was all hand counted, didn't have a radio frequency barcoding or anything like that. We need help. We're bursting at the seams, going crazy. And, maybe a fresh set of eyes will help with that process. So got started in the warehouse, helped them implement a radio frequency barcoding, inventory control scanning system. And, just that was kind of the first opportunity where I said, all right, I don't know that. That wasn't, my education was specifically in business administration with an emphasis in consulting. And it's like, you want me in the warehouse? I did a little bit of stuff in my schooling on warehousing and production systems, but I was like, that's not my area of emphasis, but I'll try it. You have a need. I'm willing to go where that need is. And that started giving me some opportunity just by having that attitude of, I'm willing to go where the business has that need. I'm willing to learn new things and try different things and really try can I be the solution to a problem that the business has? And throughout my career, that's been something that's really helped me along the way. Instead of being like, I don't want to do that, or that's not my area. It's like, if I can be the solution, then I can have the opportunity for growth and advancement throughout the company. So did that, and we then realized, hey, we've got a challenge. We've got miscommunication between what fabrication and the production side is building that needs to go out to the job sites versus the warehouse of all the prefabbed or purchased items that we're not doing anything to other than packing up in boxes and shipping out to the houses. They're not in alignment. It's causing problems. And so we said, we need somebody who is going to be the brain of the whole plant operations. It's going to coordinate that. And we called it our master scheduler piece. So then I became that role. I took over and made sure I'm going to organize everything coming in and going out of the warehouse, and everything that was fabricated, and base it off of the trucks that are going out. And first thing that needs to be pulled and loaded in the truck is the last stop that's going out. So just kind of helping with that process. But once again, it was something that was never, we hadn't done it before, and hey, how do we come up with this idea, and then who does what? And we're kind of working through the process as we figure it out. So just willing to say, okay, I'll try something different. Let's see, how do we make that better? And that was one of the other things that I really enjoy is, how do you improve things? How do you take something that's not working as well as it needs to be working and make some improvements? And so did that for a few years, and had an opportunity to shift over to our quality and training departments and safety, and work in that arena. I really enjoyed training people, helping them develop themselves and grow in their career. And so I moved over there. And at the time I moved over there, it was also when we were starting to see the down cycle of construction and kind of the Great Recession hitting. And so I was only over there for a little bit before I basically got to help lay off everybody in the team and go back over to plant operations, because we were paring down. At the height of the market in 2006, we were a 2,100 employee company. And once we started going through that Great Recession process, the construction market dropped 87% in our region. And we went down by 2010 to about 275 employees. And we had a total of about 27.5% pay cuts. Went down on top of the hourly rate pay cuts. We started having 1 day a week that we started doing basically furloughing. And so now you're working 4 days a week at 27.5% of what and it was rough. You got to figure out, people don't plan that kind of a drop in their salary. And so it was a big learning process for me, and recognizing, boy, debt and assuming that my salary is going to go up every year forever is probably not a good financial strategy, and I need to change that. So looked for ways to get smarter at home with my finances, but it also helped me in the business side of just understanding my financial acumen just a little bit better, and just being willing to kind of go wherever, do whatever we need to get done. And so with that time frame, right around 2010, we had an opportunity. We were trying to grow our service and replacement side of the business, and that wasn't. It was growing a little bit, but we were working with another company that did that in other markets, but not our market. And eventually they looked at our business and they said, what if you sold us the naming rights from your company and the book of about 60,000 homes you've done in installations over the decades that your company has been around, and we'll operate in this market as Bugler. And you guys will just sign a non-compete saying you won't do service and replacement work in existing homes. You continue to do, the biggest part of our business was new home construction, continue to do that. And as a company, we ended up saying, hey, that sounds like a good plan, because that saved about 100 of those 275 people that were still left by taking that deal and infusing the business with some cash. But we had then a 5-year non-compete. And right around the same time, I said, you know what, I got to get in part of a business that's I have an opportunity to grow. And this other company didn't do commercial. So I moved from plant operations over the commercial side and started helping run our commercial service and replacement part of the business and try to say, how do I grow revenue? How do we get ourselves out of this challenge? And the solid team, but they needed somebody to help them kind of organize, put in processes, help them with sales strategies. So those were a few of the things that I was able to do and provide for them. And while I'm in the middle of that, suddenly they go, you know, we've got all these, it's California, got all these construction defect litigation cases coming out because we're a company that has stayed in business now 77 years. And in California, they'll try to pull you into these class action lawsuits, just trying to throw anything against the wall.
Over anything. Yeah.
And so we have an incredible track record of getting out of all those claims, but we still have to prove it's funny in a country where it's you're innocent, self-proven guilty. When you're accused of some of these things, it's you have to prove that you're innocent, so you don't have to go to trial where you're presumed innocent, right? And so it kind of flips the whole system around. And so I started doing these inspections for the company on top of running the commercial and service department. And while I was doing that, I had seen kind of an opportunity. Hey, this is like a kind of a side niche market, but man, expert witnesses and things like that, they make a lot of money. So when the company was still struggling and I wasn't sure where my opportunity is going to go with the company, I talked with our legal chief legal advisor and said, hey, what are my options, as far as could I do this on the side and you guys would hire me to do this and it would be my own business and I could grow it and have some more opportunity. And they said, yeah, I think we could probably look at doing something like that. So I said, well, what would I need to do to make myself a better expert witness? Said, get your contractor's license. And so I said, okay, I'll do that. And I was like, company paying for that? Am I paying for that? They're like, well, no, the company wouldn't pay for that. So I said, okay, then because as a company, we can't compete with service and whatnot, and I can't just share, or I shouldn't say share, I can't refer a company that I felt good about for service, allow me to do service after hours. I can help out friends, family, people I know who need stuff. And so I started a little HVAC business as a second job, basically. And so I'd finish my day job, whether it's inspections or working on the commercial side. And then I'd go and look for opportunities to go help people repair or replace certain parts of their HVAC system on my own and get some skill and felt like, hey, that's going to really help me to be a good, expert witness and all that sort of good stuff. So I ran that for a couple of years on top of my day job, which was a lot, but we'd sent my wife back to school to pursue a different career that she wanted to do. So I needed to find a little bit of ways to make some extra money, make all that work on top of the fun pay cuts and all that sort of good stuff I was telling you about. So what went through that process, and then I had improved a lot of the ways we did our inspections and things like that. And I trained some other people on how to do what I was doing. So when I started talking to the chief legal advisor again, he goes, you know what? I can't do that now. You've made the process so good and we can just train anybody to do what you were doing that, I can't afford to pay a third party person to do that process anymore. And so I said, okay, interesting. And about around that same time, I had both an offer from somebody who had worked at the company when we had gone live with SAP. That was something while I was in the plant operations. I helped with whole transition to a new enterprise resource planning software platform. And he had worked through that, and then he had left and become a consultant. And he said, hey, what would you think about becoming a consultant with me? So I was like, maybe that'd be interesting. And yet I also suddenly our company's starting to grow again. It's 2015. Things are starting to come out of the ground and whatnot. And I get an offer internally to become our quality manager. We hadn't had one for a while. We had shut all that stuff down when it was slow, and things kind of fell apart with the consulting option with the guy through SAP. And so I took the quality manager role because we needed to work on that. And the funny thing is, I was probably in that job for a couple of weeks, and they go, hey, you know what? We've got this contract with the state where we get some reimbursement for training, but it takes a lot of administration. We'd like you to run this program for us. And it's going to be all employees are going to go through 24 hours of training a year, and you've got to organize and manage all of that. So, okay, we don't have a training manager, so can you just do that too? Do the quality, but then do the training. Sure, sounds good. So I'm working through that for probably about 4 or 5 months, and they had hired on a safety manager, and the safety manager at the time just wasn't working. And so they said, we gotta transition from this guy. And they said, can you take safety too? Do quality, do training, but do safety. Okay.
Keep adding to the order at this point. Anything else? Yeah. Might as well tell me now.
Absolutely. And so, but you know what? I just look at it as these are all opportunities. They're all needs. People so often look at, well, there's just problems and somebody else should go fix that. And if you're willing to be that person that sees the problem and says, I'm willing to try and tackle that. And so one of the interesting things was the safety guy that we had hired, he was an employee for another safety guy we interviewed that was too expensive for us at the time, right? He was, but he's really good at what he did. And we did a really good job. We transitioned the guy that we brought in for safety. We helped him find a job with a builder because he had previous experience as a superintendent. And so we got him a job with one of the builders that we worked with as an assistant superintendent. So it wasn't just like, hey, kick him to the curb, go figure it out. And the safety director from this other company where this guy had worked for before was like, hey, I really appreciate how well you treated him and found him another opportunity. And so I started connecting with this guy and saying, well, how did you fix safety at your company? Like, you went from this horrible safety rating to a really good safety rating, saved your company a bunch of money. It's why you're able to charge a lot of money for what you do. How did you do that? And he goes, you know what, I'll help you, but I've got this kind of side hustle thing where I make safety shirts and safety stickers and all that stuff. If your company will buy your safety gear from me, I'll give you some consulting on how to fix this. I said, well, we got to buy some of that safety stuff anyway. Sounds good. I'll just switch over some of the stuff we're buying, some of the shirts and different things like that. We'll get them from you. And I basically get free consulting because he wasn't a lot more expensive than what we were already paying our other vendors. And worked with him, and basically through that process was able to put together a program and go pitch that to 3 different insurance companies for our next renewal, and was able to save the company $750,000 on our workers' comp and auto insurance premiums. And that amount of money allowed us, when I told you we'd taken pay cuts and everything else, we'd not only done that, but we had cut down to where for a while we had no holiday or PTO days. And then as things kind of grew back, everybody just got 1 week. So everybody had 1 week PTO, which was not our historic numbers. Historically, we had, like, you work so many years, you get 1 week, then you work a little longer, you get 2, and you work even longer, you get 3. And so traditionally I had enough tenure to where I was getting 3 weeks before all the downturn. And so with that savings, we were able to fund all the employees to go back to their original levels of PTO. So now suddenly we could have 2 or 3 weeks, and which was great. And we've been able to start building back. By that point, we were building back wages to what they were before all the pay cuts, and so
Had
just
some money coming in, and things were growing back to where they were. Obviously, because at this point we're in 2017, 2018, correct?
Yeah, started in about this part about 2016 with this safety piece, and yeah, I mean, construction had been kind of coming back since about 2013. It kind of hit its bottom and then started growing a bit, and that was one of the reasons why in 2016 we're going, you know what, we've brought all of the tradespeople back that want to work in this industry. And now we've got a decision. Like, how do we get, we're growing as a business, how do we get more people that can do the trades? And we said, we just have to build them. And as a company, we had started, we moved away from the unions in the early 90s. But what we did when we became non-union is we said, what were the good things about the union? What would make our team members choose to not go union? And well, good benefits and a training program with an apprenticeship school. So we said, well, can we do those things for our employees, but not have to have the union? And not have to have them pay union dues, and we don't have to deal with a third party kind of getting involved in the business. And so we said, all right, well, let's make sure we provide healthcare benefits, and then let's look for a way we can build apprenticeship school. So since 1993, we've had an in-house apprenticeship school. For a while, it was state certified. Now it's federally certified, and we offered that as a way to help grow employees. And so in 2016, it just fit of like, you know what, we're just going to start hiring people from the ground up. They're going to be, whether they're coming out of high school or wherever, you want to learn construction, we're going to teach you the trades or teach you HVAC. We had added, during that Great Recession portion, we had added plumbing and electrical in 2008 for a while. We ended up shutting down the electrical portion, but we kept plumbing. And in 2012, one of the big things that helped us out is we merged in a division of another company that said, California's not fun to work for. They were based out of Dallas. And they said, we're going to shut down all California operations. And so we were able to take the team from Northern California and absorb them into our business, absorb their contracts. And that's really where we started being good at both trades. And so,
because you inherited a whole division that was specializing in something you weren't even doing before, and they all needed work, right?
They all needed work, and they were our best customer at the time, Lennar Homes. They were the plumber that was like the best plumber for Lennar Homes, and so it just strengthened our relationship with that builder, who in our region right now builds twice as many homes basically than any other builder in the region. They are the big gorilla in the room, if you will. And so it just helped refine that. And that was part of when we started seeing growth that was good. But by 2016, we're going, there aren't people sitting on the sidelines who have the skills. And so we've got to start building that. And it's another one of those things, I told you that training program that and reimbursement stuff I was working on. It was just, all right, how do we scale up people from nothing to a journeyman? And we built a program
internally as well, guys who we already have on our team, essentially.
Yep. And or brand new people who've never done construction, we'll bring them into the team and we'll build them up. And so we grew, we were down to that 275 by 2010. Well, by 2016, we were about 700 people. So we were growing back, but we still needed more. The industry was growing, the upcycle was picking back up. And so we just continued to grow. Our team members were a little over 1,000 today. We've been as much as 1,400, but we've seen some ups and downs here post COVID and things like that. But that, being willing to step into safety, that was one of the things. And then that savings was one of the things that really got the attention of the former president, now CEO of the company, and saying, you know what, you've shown you can take some things and make some improvements, turn things around, and have some big impact and show some leadership and things that when you're talking about safety, you got to get that influence across the entire organization, but you're nobody's boss, right? And that's a harder thing to do. When you have a title and a position, it's much easier. It doesn't guarantee it, but it's easier to get that influence and have that direction over people because, quote unquote, you're the boss or you have this high position. But in construction, while safety is absolutely an important and critical function, everybody's focused on production. And so the production managers, the people who are leading the field teams, they have a bigger say. So to make some impacts in safety is a big deal in a construction type company. And so I see some things in you. would you be interested in, moving into a executive level role? And I said, absolutely, I would be interested in that. And so,
And what year was this conversation, Josh?
this was in 2017.
Okay.
After all the savings and some of the different impacts I'd made with the safety department, with quality, with training, ran that training program, and was able to to give an example, we'd had a contract with the state prior to the one that I was involved with, and we did really poorly. We used maybe 13% of the dollars that they had allocated for the funding, and that's not good. The state doesn't like that. And so they want to show that you're actually using it, because they're pigeonholing those dollars and saying these are allocated for this purpose, and then they don't use them. Like, well, what are you doing? You're not effective. So I was able to get us 100% of our contract dollars through the next contract used as well. To do that, you just got to train more hours than what you say, because there's always little reasons why certain things might not qualify, and turnover doesn't count. You got to show that you're maintaining those employees and you're paying them more and things like that. But was able to do that. So just, hey, take on a challenge, take on a project, and get some results. And that helped give me that opportunity. So in October of 2017 is when I became a vice president with the organization. And I missed the part to tell you that 2015, just so you know the name, that's when our non-compete ended and we changed our name. But same company, been around here for 77 years.
So Villara, the name of Villara has only existed since 17, but it's been the same company since, the 50s.
1947. Yeah.
47. Got it. Yeah, Josh, what an incredible journey, very, very non-traditional path, but unique in its own way. Obviously, there's not necessarily a traditional path to make president, VP and then president. But so a couple of things you stood out there. Number one, starting work at 13, working full time. I mean, that had to have a huge impact in terms of your discipline and your accountability and your responsibility from a young age. I mean, I thought I started working early, and I was 15 and a half, but 13, and I definitely wasn't working full time. I was working like one shift a week on Sundays at my dad's restaurant, and that was it. Full time, I mean, what kind of impact do you think that had on the rest of your career in terms of your approach, discipline, accountability, that is obviously reflected well and had a positive impact on your career growth thus far, obviously?
Yeah, I think it's critical. I mean, whenever you start work, you start building the habits and the skill sets that make you a good employee, a good team player, a good part of any organization or group. And so when you start earlier, you just get a head start on all that. The interesting thing is I wasn't quite 13, it was 14 that I started my oldest daughter working here over the summers as well, because I wanted that same process. And she started at 14, and then she did the next year, this last summer at 15. And everybody in the organization said, wow, she's really grown a lot in that 1 year. She's really matured. And that was, for me, one of the things that I saw as well, is it helped me mature. It helped me with my process in school. I was a better student because I understood a little bit more of the work ethic and what was on the other side of why am I doing this?
Why am I put the hours in? Right. This, what it means when you put the hours in, what the result is, and how that feeling, how good that feeling can be when you work for something, of course. Right.
Absolutely. And my, at the time, my parents were like, hey, you can take a very small portion of that paycheck and use it for fun stuff, and the rest of it goes in the bank, and you're saving it towards a car. And so it was just teaching me some financial literacy, and hey, don't just spend everything you make as soon as you make it. Put some stuff away. In fact, for me, because everything else was covered, as a kid, I put most of it away and just had a very little bit that you could use. And so I still had, more disposable income than most of my friends, most of my buddies at the time, but it was still a very small portion of that paycheck. And I felt good about making my $4 an hour minimum wage, at the time. But hey, that was great for a kid.
Yeah, for a kid who's 14 and you're putting in the hours, it adds up quick. And like you mentioned, I bet you had loads more money than any of your other friends who are sitting around on Tuesday afternoon during the summer when you're working your 8-9 hour shift.
Yeah, absolutely.
You said something else interesting that I wanted to touch on as well. That early on you were very, very bullish or keen on taking the jobs and taking on the responsibilities that others did not want, right? And I had another guy on the podcast a few months ago who had a similar story. He works in operations, and he told the exact same story in a way. He said, yeah, when, our higher ups would come down and say, hey, who wants to do these, kind of crappy jobs that no one else wanted? For 2 years, he made a promise to himself, I was going to take every job that no one wanted, because at the end of those 2 years, he knew loads more than his colleagues did, because yeah, they were not as great and they were difficult to manage, but he learned something from each one that everyone else was resistant to. And he came out on the other side those 2 years later. He even knew to set that goal. 2 years, I'm just going to take on every job that no one wants. The guy's a VP now, and all of his colleagues, who knows, but he was like, I am, eons ahead of everyone else, because I had that mindset and that approach to go in and learn as much as I could, good job or not. And so you mentioned the same thing. And I just love that, because it's far and few between. You don't hear that often, right? And it's important to kind of have that mentality and that mindset and that approach, especially with work, especially when you're trying to grow, and really understand where your ceiling is. Maybe you don't even know how to do a specific job, or you're not as aware or familiar of, how to go and execute a specific project, but you go out and you figure it out. And I think it's a really important thing to be keyed in on, because a lot of people don't have that mindset. It's like, oh no, I'm not going to do that job. It's like, well, if you did and you had that mindset, like, oh, I'm going to go and take that job purposefully, think about how much smarter you're going to be in like 2 years when you go through a process like that, right? And I think it's really important.
Absolutely. It does a few things for you. It gives you those different experiences, but you start. So I didn't even tell you all the different departments that I got to work through when I was doing part-time summers and things like that. I basically have had the opportunity to work in every area of the organization, and you build an understanding of the processes and how the business works, but you also build relationships. And our company, longstanding company with a lot of tenure, there's people still here today that 20 years ago I worked for them. Now they work for me. But I still have a very strong, good relationship with them. And when you understand both how the business works and you've got some relationships with the people in the different departments, you can suddenly have a much greater influence and impact on when I need to make a change across departments, when I need other people to get involved to be a part of this solution. They're not like, well, who are you? And you don't know what we do, and you don't know how we do it. Actually, we know each other. You know me, and I know how your department works because I worked in there with
I've done your job before. Yeah, I've literally done what you're doing, so I know exactly what's going on.
That was a huge accelerator for me in initiating change and having growth, was just having that understanding of how those other departments work and having those connections with those people. I know Jim Collins talks a little bit about who luck and says it's not what you know, it's who you know. And that's true within an industry in a larger sense, and it's true within an organization at a smaller scale, that, man, you have those relationships and know those people. I mean, there's lots of people spend a lot of time and effort on networking, and there's a reason for it. It does generate those connections and those opportunities, and I know a guy or I know a gal that knows how to do these things, or can help out. You don't know that when you don't reach out and make those different connections and be willing to step into those other roles. One other thing that I see as a challenge, so we've got a career development department here that I help build, and really works on focusing on how do people, take steps in what are their goals today and where do they want to see their career move in the future. But one challenge that some people will have, and it really is a limiter, is they'll say, I don't want to do that because it's not part of my job description. If you'll pay me more, then I'll do that thing, whatever that other task is. Like, am I getting more money for it? And for me, it's just what I've seen. It's backwards. You got to take on the extra stuff, and people see that you're able to do it, and then they promote you and give you the increase in the pay. But if you're always asking for the pay first before you show that you can perform and do it, it doesn't usually sit as well with those leaders. And sometimes when they're in a pinch and the labor market's tight, they'll do that. But then the labor market always goes up and down. And so when the labor market's really stressed and there's lots of layoffs or people out of work, then you don't have that leverage. And so to me, it's like, don't play the game of, well, who's buying and who's selling and whatnot. It's like, just, look for those opportunities and be willing to step out and try some things that aren't quote unquote in your job description in your area. You'll learn some things from it, but you'll also show you're the person that the company can look to when we have a challenge, when we need help, when we need to grow, when we need to improve. That's who we go to first, and they'll think of you. They'll know your name. They'll know who you are because you're willing to do that.
Well, look how well it worked for you. I mean, you went through one of the biggest economic crashes with the company. You did literally every job possible at that point within the company, took pay cuts, saw people get laid off, had to lay off other people. I mean, you literally had seen it all. So it's really that kind of people. And unfortunately, I think today, to your point, we see more and more of the ladder, if you will, in terms of people coming in and just saying, yeah, what's the pay going to be first, and then understand what the job requirements are later. And the work isn't necessarily the priority, and doing a good job and not even showing up and being really good at that job, but showing up and showing some initiation, some enthusiasm, and determination to be a great employee. You don't need to be the best employee right out the gate, but you do need to show up with that enthusiasm and that drive to say, hey, that shows, hey, I'm going to be a really, really good employee. And if I don't know how to do something, I'm going to figure out, et cetera, as opposed to like, how much am I going to get paid? And then we'll talk about how hard I'm going to work, for example. And I think those values are starting to maybe get away from the newer generations for whatever reason. But you're right. I mean, it's a perfect example. You are really a perfect example of it in terms of, I'll take a pay cut. I'll do every job in the company. And, 10, 15 years go by, you're the president you're running the whole show now. I mean, are there people who are at the company still who you started with back way in the day when you were going through the tumultuous times in 06, 07?
Absolutely. We've got people with 35, 36, 38 years of tenure. Our CEO has 43 years of tenure. He's the top with all of that. But yeah, because we, whether it's that mindset of wanting to build into other people and develop and grow our team members, people see they've got greater opportunities with us, and we stick with them. We help them grow. And so they stick with us. And so we've got a really good level of retention. And there's a lot of, whether it's field division managers, whether it's plant managers that I worked with when I was working in the plant operations that are still there. Yeah, there's lots and lots of that here with this type of a company.
Yeah. Well, and it's a culture thing. I mean, think about all the time you invested in the training and figuring out ways to optimize the internal processes and how far it's gone for Villara at this point now. And it shows, you have tenured employees and the turnover is low for a reason, right? And that's just because of the environment and the culture that has been set 77 years, but still being maintained to this day, which is, obviously really important for the output and productivity and efficiency of your team. In developing from within. Example A with Josh right here, of course. And Josh, what about when you finally got, when we got to, 2017, 2018, you started getting to that executive level? What was that transition like, coming from being, I can do everything guy? I've accomplished so many things, across so many departments at so many different levels. Now you're sitting in boardrooms, for example. What was that transition like? To VP, and then obviously now to president? How did that sit with you? How did you adjust to the day in the life, if you will?
Yeah, it is an interesting transition, and I think you see it from every stage. When you go from being a good doer at whatever task or process or thing you're responsible for, to whether it's being like a team lead or then a supervisor or a manager. You have to continue to give up being the person who can just do that thing really well. And now you're starting to say, how do I help guide other people to do that thing really well?
Because you're hands off now, right?
Because now, yeah, I can't take all the calls. I can't do all this process. I can't install all the material, whatever it is. I can't do all of those things because I'm not the person that's responsible to do that. And I have got these other responsibilities really of developing people, of leading the teams, of working between different departments and different challenges. And so when you move up from a manager to now an executive, it's just, well, now I'm leading leaders of leaders, right? I continue to have to look at how do I help them to be able to remove roadblocks for their team members. How do I help them to bring on new staffing and train and develop them up and set the infrastructure so that they have what they need. And I'll be honest, I'm a details guy. I love the granularity. And as you advance up, you have to be looking more and more at the bigger picture. And so some of that I had to give up a little bit of knowing all the details and allowing my team members to be more involved in that and trusting that, hey, if I build into them and develop them, then they're going to be able to know the detail level, work with their teams. And now I'm kind of letting them take some of that. Like when I became an executive, I had a safety manager, and I had to say, all right, well, safety, I did it this way, but now I'm letting that over to the safety manager, and he's choosing to do it some different ways. But I've got to let that go because I don't have time to sit in and try to do his job and do my job. And that part's tough. You see it at different levels, different leaders who want to step in and micromanager can't let go. And you have to allow the people you're leading in those teams to do what they need to do. You still have to take responsibility. You're still the ultimate leader in that area, but allowing them to thrive and excel and do their thing and not be the one who's jumping into everything.
Yeah. And I think the beauty of it all is that you've worked those roles, and we touched on this earlier. You've been developed from within, if you will. And that seems to be a trend across the board at Villara, but it's not like some guy, and you touched on this earlier, it's not like you're some guy who's come in and hasn't worked at the company and people are going, you're telling me what to do? Like, who the heck is this guy? It's like, no, I've done your job, and I've done the job beneath you and of the people that you're managing as well. And I think that's really advantageous for somebody in your position now, because the ins and outs of every small detail and every element of the business. And I think it really helps in terms of a leadership style too, because there's an unspoken level of respect because you've been in their shoes and the shoes of their employees as well. And it trickles down. I think that's probably played a huge role in terms of success given the seat you're in at the moment, because you've done those jobs from top to bottom, right?
Yeah, it definitely helps to give you credibility with all those individuals. The funny thing is for me now, I've been with the company for 23 years, and there are people who are coming up who don't necessarily know my whole story. The newer people that don't know I've done their role or things like that. So you start talking shop with them, and they're, whoa, you really know this part of the business. You know how this works. So and so who works over there, and so. It builds that credibility, whether you can just talk the talk and walk the walk, or whether they've been with you for 10 or 15 years and know that they've seen you in those areas. Either way, it definitely helps with your level of influence with those individuals and just how much faster you can get buy-in and get things done. So that does help a lot.
Absolutely, Josh. And obviously you've got the people thing down and the executive thing down, given, as we've said, the company in and out at this point. You're maximizing efficiency and productivity, and there's really positive influence, across the board in terms of, maxing out everyone and what they're doing. What about the role of technology? It's a common theme today, especially in the construction industry, and utilizing and harnessing technology to help, make improvements across the board. How are you in your new role, utilizing technology today in terms of your operations, and what charge is that leading internally for Villara in terms of optimization?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I'll be honest with you, construction is not known for being on the leading edge of technology.
It's not. Nope.
We tend to be the laggard, and some of it is just can be fear of that change, that shift. So many of the people we've had for the 20, 30 years, they're used to the analog, right? They're used to the manual. They're used to things being different. But at the same token, you watch construction and you go, there's been a lot of innovation through. A lot of it is tool technology. You compare when they used to use brushes to paint a house to paint sprayers today, or you compare Yankees to try and use and drill holes in it only 30 or 40 years ago to power drills and power tools, and just the level of efficiency. And yet the build cycle time to build a house is not that much different. In fact, in some cases here in California, it's slower than it used to be. Now we have a lot more regulation, a lot more additional things we have to do for energy efficiency and stuff like that come into play. So the scope of work has changed some, but all of that advancement, you're like, why are we still so far behind on things? And so, we're probably only 2018 or 2019 when we started issuing iPhones to all field employees. And that allowed us to shift our time card process, which has been huge. So traditionally in construction, you'd have on Monday morning, you'd have a time card sheet you'd be filling out for last week. What did you do? And you turn it in. And we do a lot of different tasks, and they work on a lot of different houses and different things. It's like, that's not very accurate information. And then it's a piece of paper. Has to go back to the supervisor. Has to go back to our payroll department. That has to manually data entry and go, is that a 3 or an 8? All that sort of stuff that just doesn't make any sense at all. So we started doing time cards. We started saying, no, you got to do these daily. And so now the last few years, we've been getting so much better job costing data and understanding how efficient are we really at these different specific subsets of the tasks where we're tracking it to that level. And so we're just continuing to try to leverage that tool. We do not utilize to its full extent, the power of, for example, the iPhone in the hands of each one of your field employees, but we're using it more and more with digitizing forms and applications and things like that, and then trying to be able to take that information back and turn it into KPIs that we can dashboard and see, how are we performing, which supervisors are performing better, especially when you've got certain builders that build the same product in multiple regions. And so you got supervisors literally building the same floor plan, the same house, but different performance levels. How do we take advantage of the skills that they've learned? One of the areas that's helped us, and sometimes some of it touches on technology and some of it just touches on the way we do things, is we started a transition in 2017 to say we want to become a lean organization. And lean is also formerly known as Toyota Production Systems, just how they operate their business. But construction is kind of mobile manufacturing, right? It happens to be that your warehouse or your shop where you're fabricating stuff happens to be at a different location as you're moving along the production line, but it's still a lot of the fundamentals of manufacturing and how you do that. And so we try and use that to look at what is the standardized work practices for how we do things. How do we look at improving those practices and understanding the takt times to complete different tasks that we need. And then taking that data and analyzing it, and then saying, how do we make improvements? How do we retrain on the things that we've learned?
Right, because there's so much information in your data that without the current technology, it's been difficult to harness. I mean, obviously data scientists, but to go through 40,000 rows of Excel sheets, for example, it takes them weeks. And then by the time they are able to provide those insights, the data's changed and they're not up to date, right? And so I think, especially in industries like construction, supply chain, et cetera, when there's so much data, there's tools now, with semantic layers, artificial intelligence, and what have you, that can look at your data and ingest so much data in real time and then give you those insights. It's huge. It's like, okay, we have 2 floor plans that are the exact same in Phoenix and San Diego. Why is the Phoenix job 30% behind the San Diego? Right. What are the insights telling us that can lead us to an understanding as to how to improve, for example? And it's really huge. I know construction's been technologically behind and traditionally analog, if you will. But I think soon there's going to be, a bit of a revolution in terms of realizing, man, some of the tools available to us today are so revolutionary in maximizing some efficiencies here that they're not going to afford to be able to say no anymore, especially with what's available today.
It's a big need, right? When I was telling you that we really haven't sped up the production cycle of building a home, we need to find greater efficiencies and better ways to do it, because you see the crisis in our country for housing issues. And
Major.
there's different reasons why. In California, one of the things that people probably don't recognize is there's anywhere between right around $120,000 per lot of just fees and entitlements that come from the local jurisdiction that have nothing to do with the price of the dirt that you buy, that have nothing to do with the price of the structure that you build. It's just permissions and allowing you to build and inspections and everything else, that just throw that on there and say, all right, well, that's just an additional $120,000 of cost that adds what would be perceived as very little value to the average homeowner. But it's just part of what it is. About a third of the cost is your actual cost to build in what you're paying for in a new home. And so we work on that, but we could get that down to zero, and you still have the other 2/3 of that cost being in the land, in the development of land, and in the permitting and entitlements and things like that. It's why, for example, in our region, it's so difficult, so expensive. Other parts of the country where they don't have as many rules and regulations, you're seeing housing boom. We've got a partner company that we work with that's out of Dallas. They're going to build 50,000 homes in the Dallas-Fort Worth market, and we're probably going to build about 9 in the Sacramento market here in California. And it's a big difference between regulation, cost to build, allowing how they're able to do that. So some of that is not in our control, but the things that are in our control, we've got to figure out, how do we make that 1/3 of the cost? How do we make that as efficient as possible, as effective? How do we pull lead time out of it so that we're able to build that home in a quicker amount of time? Because there's carrying costs for that builder. And so if I can save them days in their production schedule, that's value to my customer.
Yeah, no, it's huge. I mean, and obviously you're running into state regulations, which I think are the biggest hurdle, obviously, with that specific situation. But yeah, no, exactly. And the thing is all these questions you're asking, the answers exist somewhere. They exist within your data, and a lot of times, and in terms of the market averages, commodity prices, supply chain, etc. But I guess it's just a question of, how do you harness that data and get those insights, because they can be super helpful in terms of planning and, even utilizing predictive analytics, for example. All these things can, it'd be a hurricane of success and optimization if utilized correctly, obviously, especially in your industry. The 50,000 versus the 9 in Dallas and versus Sacramento, it's like a significant difference, right? So how can we bridge that gap in a way? How can we utilize tools available that we may or may not be aware of yet to help bridge that gap and plan for these things to make the damage seem, less, for example. So yeah, Josh, no, absolutely. And last question, before I let you go, what would your advice be for somebody looking to get into the construction HVAC industry, especially in terms of career growth, leadership development, et cetera? Obviously, you've had a hell of a career, one hell of a story, and, obviously a journey as well. What would you say to somebody who's looking to follow in your footsteps, if you will, and how to go about doing it kind of in a successful way like you did?
Well, I think we've touched on a few of the pieces here already, but that's
Definitely.
Be willing to step into the needs of the business. If you're going in, be ready to learn. I want to learn. Be ready to learn on your own time. Spending that time to, learn the next steps. I'm always trying to go through books and things like that outside of work. And so get books on whatever, if it's HVAC, if it's construction, and construction books, but any career that you're passionate about is you got to become an expert in that area. And part of that's just putting in the work, putting in the time, putting in the effort. It's connecting with the different people. I'd say recognize within your organization, you can learn from anybody. Don't have the mentality, well, I'm not going to listen to that person because they're at a lower position. You can learn really good, sometimes the most important information from the most frontline worker on the team. They can have the very best ideas and suggestions. And so be willing to learn from other people, be willing to take on new opportunities or challenges that are going on in the organization, and then, show up and do a good job. Those are there's some basic things, but there's just a lot of people who don't do that. The other thing that's key, have a good attitude. People don't want to work with somebody who doesn't have a good attitude. And so it will carry you a long way to be willing to learn, to be willing to step into difficult situations, say, I'll help. I'm not sure. I might need some support, but I'll help. I'll try. And I'll have a good attitude about it. You will go so far in life. In fact, Patrick Lencioni has a whole book called The Ideal Team Player. And it says, be humble, hungry, and smart. And humble isn't meek, but it's just recognizing you and I may have different skill sets and abilities. I'm going to appreciate my skills that are different than yours, but I'm also going to value and appreciate your skills and not try to downplay the things that you're able to do. Hungry means I'm just going to have that productive. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to work. I'm going to grow. I'm going to make things happen. And the smart piece is interesting. It's really more looking at that emotional intelligence more so than the cognitive IQ level intelligence. Just saying, understand the wake that you leave behind you with how you treat people and how you interact. And a big part of that's obviously the attitude we talked about. But if you've got those things going for you, you can go a long, long way.
Absolutely. And, example A here with you. So, Josh, fantastic. Thank you so much for the invaluable insights there. Tremendous journey, tremendous story. Really appreciate your willingness to come on and share them with us today, and good luck to you. I mean, thanks so much. Obviously, it seems like you've turned things around a few times, and as you know, things go up and down, but seems like we're doing okay now, and glad to hear that you're still going strong. So thanks again for sharing all these insights with us and joining us on the Results Loading podcast. This has been fantastic.
Thank you for having me.